Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and we're back for part two of our discussion of the quarterback play in 2025 for the Baltimore Ravens. Joining me to do that is Nik Mehta. Nik, how you doing?
Doing great, Ken. There are a few people with whom I enjoy talking about football more, specifically for the purpose of learning. I love asking you questions, getting to pick your brain when we do this.
I appreciate you. You're very high processing analytics or an analyst. I'll say this, and I really appreciate that with you, Nik. And I've appreciated a lot of time spent at camp with Nik. He's a guy I often sidle up to, and we talk about what we're seeing at camp, along with a lot of the other people. Jonas Schaefer and others are great there. But really appreciate the relationship we've developed there, and I hope we have many more camps together to go. Although I'm getting a little long in the tooth for that.
Absolutely, Ken.
Yeah,
Two more
right.
camps, not to you getting long in the tooth.
Yeah, right. So in the first episode, we talked a lot about Lamar Jackson's 2025 season. A couple of keynotes were that his running ability kind of hurt the offense in some other ways, and this is the injured Lamar Jackson not being able to do some of the things he had before. We talked about some of the impact of offensive line play on that, but also the fact that the misdirection in the Ravens offense was largely reduced, and that impacted both his own runs and the runs of his running mates in the backfield.
Yeah, that the gravity was gone. The injuries were, such a big part of his lack of mobility, and also the restrictions that builds into the offense. So it's not just the lack of mobility, but it's also what that turns the offense into, and what the menu that defenses just don't need to expect quite as much. There were moments where, and I forgot to mention this, there were moments where he would pull the ball and it would take the defense completely off guard, and he would actually have a clear lane around the edge because the defensive end that the replayer would just be crashing down so hard. But he just, he didn't do that enough. Obviously, he couldn't do that enough to really take advantage of it. And I think that actually, to me, represents how much teams had started to not worry about him pulling the ball in those read options, because they would look stunned sometimes when he would pull the few times that he did pull it, typically in the middle of the season.
There's a big point. Look back to the first episode for that. And Nik also had a really good one about the 3-man rush with a spy and some of the drops from simulated pressure that confused the offensive line in particular. We talked about that at some length. It's a worthwhile discussion, I think, that you'll probably like if you go back and listen to that first episode. But let's pick it up with stuff in the second that we really need to talk about. Pocket time was another thing that was down slightly for Lamar Jackson. It doesn't look like a big reduction, because in 2025 he was at 3.01 in terms of time to throw. He was at 3.14 in 2024, which is a very high number. I know that difference sounds subtle because it's only about a seventh of a second or an eighth of a second per play, but it actually is not insignificant at all. Very badly misunderstood stat, by the way. For Lamar Jackson, that's a great number. You want it to be as high as possible. For most quarterbacks, for most pocket quarterbacks, you don't want a longer time to throw at all. You want to get rid of that ball quickly. So Joe Burrow certainly would not want or Aaron Rodgers for certain would not want a high time to throw number.
Yeah, I mean, Lamar is, pretty much his whole career has been top 5 starting quarterbacks in that range in terms of time to throw. And I would also note that that mix is often a couple of the best quarterbacks in the league and a couple of the worst.
Yep.
Like in 2023, the top 6 is Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. Neither had a good season. CJ Stroud, his fantastic rookie season. Jalen Hurts, who actually was not that great in my opinion that year. Mahomes, and then Lamar Jackson. So that gives you a sense of, for certain guys, this is a strength and a feature, not a bug. For other guys, it is a bug because they can't get rid of the ball quickly. They hold on to it too long. And they're not, really a large portion of that is they're not comfortable and set within their own offense.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that's a good explanation of it. There were fewer of the really long extended plays in 2025. We were lucky enough to see some against Pittsburgh, which turned into big plays at the end of that game. But there were also fewer, I thought, extended play targets. So in 2023 and 24, Lamar did a good job of spreading the ball around to a number of receivers. We had, Aguilar. I thought it got some Bateman, likely Wallace, but a lot of those disappeared. And it was primarily Flowers and Andrews this last year who got a lot of the extended play targets.
Yeah, and we mentioned this in the first one. I think there's it was to me, there was an extent to which, especially with Bateman, where I just and I'm looking forward to reviewing your wide receiver episode because I imagine you're going to expand on this. But exactly what happened with Rashad Bateman this year, and he was a good scramble partner for Jackson and
Yep.
other times, and especially last year. And so that element being almost non-existent was a surprise to the extent where I couldn't even really figure out specifically what it was with Bateman. And even with Andrews, there were some, but still not a lot, and certainly not the effectiveness that Andrews and Lamar have previously had on their extended play connections. It also felt like the extended plays were not going as far downfield. He wasn't finding guys as far downfield as he normally would. Sometimes they were just more underneath 5, 6, 7 yards instead of finding that, explosive play off the scramble like he's often able to do.
Yeah, definitely. A review of that, I think it's going to be very difficult. I wish there was an easy way, and maybe there is some way because NGS is tied into the um, NFL Pro now. So it may be possible to find time to throw above a certain level. I'd like to know that, but if it is, I'll look at those. I think that'd be fun to do for the wide receiver episode. Did the tight end episode already, and we talked in the first episode about just how badly tight end productivity dropped off from the 143.5 rating in 23 and 24 to 90.1 this year. It's a chasm of production that opened up in terms of the Ravens not reaching previous levels when Lamar was the MVP and the unrecognized and the unofficial MVP. Let's move on. Talk about some topic that's a little different, and that's Lamar being vocal on the field. Now, it's 23 and 24 season, even worse before then. Well, worse before then, I'll say, not even worse before then, because I thought he was good in 23 and 24. I thought Lamar had taken really big steps forward in terms of what he did on the field. In 22 and 4, I thought maturity was like an ongoing issue for Lamar. He kicked the football the one time, he gets upset with a delay of game or a false start. He can get really upset about things. And I'm okay if he gets upset with the player occasionally, or if he even takes him aside and says, look, hey, you need to do that better kind of thing. I'm okay with that kind of face-to-face thing. I don't want him being Aaron Rodgers and so demonstrative after every play, basically giving the impression that it's not my fault. I didn't think he did that, but I don't want him heading any way in that direction.
Lamar has great player syndrome, which is not everyone. Why can't everyone play at my level? I think that there's some issue with, and this is true of a lot of very talented players. This isn't just Lamar, but they are doing everything they can. They're operating at such a high level, and they see, their teammates do something, and they're like, this is your basic job. Catch the ball, block the guy, don't false start, whatever it is. And, that I can understand how that can sometimes be a tough thing for a player of that caliber to, recalibrate. It's, similar to the idea that great players don't always make great coaches because they're trying to form their players into some version of them. I think Lamar had some more reasonable personnel concerns, specifically in the Roman era, and reasons to not be frustrated at who he had on the field. And he would get frustrated at what they would do. And it was kind of felt like he had higher expectations than, what that receiver trio, what some of those receivers' talent level actually was. Mm-hmm. I do think the talent that he's surrounded with now, especially, Andrews making a drop and that kind of thing, those are, I think, fair expectations for him to have and get frustrated at. But I also think the sense of that being vocal and expressing his emotions on the field, it also comes through in the kind of he wants to win. He's so clearly frustrated by the fact that they haven't gotten it done, and he could feel all year. And this was something I'm sure you noticed too. During the win streak, everyone was like, oh, they're back. Everything's great. And I'm sure, I remember you were one of the people that was like, this is not the way this is supposed to look. This is still not fine. These are weaker opponents. And I felt like you could really see his frustration. You could see him feel that. Like, we're in a 5-game win streak, but we are not doing what we're supposed to do. We're not playing as good as we're supposed to. And so I don't want to bring everything down, right, because we're winning. But also the standard is still higher. We're not meeting it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because this was a year, wasn't the case in 23 and 24 at all, when they went 19-7 against winning teams and had the two highest totals ever for wins versus winning teams in a season. This year, obviously, didn't have a good record versus winning teams to start it, and some of that was Huntley, because Huntley won 2 games against winning teams, and the Bears and the Packers. So you really get down. Lamar was only 6-7 as a starter on the year. Rush threw in an 0-2 in there, and then Huntley was 2-0 to get him to 8-9. But the thing I thought this year was that the rest of the league was flawed enough that the Ravens would still be able to find their footing and come back. Then you're in exactly the right point. When the Ravens are 6-5, they're leading the division, and they're going about to face Pittsburgh for the game in week 13, I guess it was. They lose that game. Well, for starters, flukish loss, but also really heavily officiating driven. And I know with the Bills complaining about what happened to them, this is going to be on deaf ears for anybody who's outside of the Ravens situation. But they had 3 plays in that game. The likely drop, scale of 1 to 10, I'd say it's about a 3 in terms of how upset I was about it. But it's higher than that when you consider the Aaron Rodgers play is blown dead the moment he goes down, as opposed to him as a receiver having to maintain the ball all the way to the ground, as, say, the previous week, Devontae Walker had to do versus Dax Hill. And that was ruled incompletion, but similar to the Bills situation recently. And then the big one, which the league had to spend an hour on the phone with the Ravens about, at least most of the call, as I understand it, was on the Travis Jones personal foul on the kick, which gave them a 4-point swing and gave the touchdown. So anyway, point being that I still thought this is really more a matter of the Ravens getting beaten by some external circumstances. They should have won this game. Was it good that it was close? No. They should have beaten the crap out of a team like the Steelers, I thought. But, they were still going to have a second chance against them. Then they go and they lose that game to the Bengals at home. And and they got beat badly in that game. It wasn't close at all. Yeah. And then I thought, okay, this is a much worse position than we thought possible. Actually, it was in the other order, wasn't it? It was the Bengals were first. They lost that game at home.
Bengals were first, yeah.
And then they because the very next week they came back and they beat the Bengals 24-0. And a lot of ups and downs in a season like this. But it didn't look right the whole year in terms of series success rate or drive success rate, the ones where you convert a high percentage of your first downs. That was my main problem with that offense.
Yeah, and you could tell Lamar, after games and his pressers would convey that feeling of, I'm glad we won, but we're still not there. We're still not where I want to be. I also think him being more vocal, we talked about this a lot in the first podcast, is leadership within the building and the extent to which, Steve Bisciotti kind of threw down a gauntlet and challenged him to step up and be a true leader of this franchise in a way that, he has not been, certainly to the extent that the Ravens would want, I would say. Again, I think, Lamar Jackson discourse is bizarre, toxic at times. And the idea that he is not smart, not cerebral, not a good locker room leader are all kind of silly. But I do think that, the kind of more functional things he could do. We talked about this in the first episode. So I'd go listen to our full conversation on that. But that being vocal in that way, I think, is something that the team is looking for.
Yeah, I mean, Ray Lewis was not a guy who scored high on the Wonderlic, and I don't remember exactly what his score was. Something tells me it might have been 13, but it's in the kind of the lower end of the range, and that's correct. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
In any case,
so was Lamar's, I think.
So was Lamar's was 13.
I believe it was. Yeah.
It does not prevent somebody from being an outstanding leader. Lamar does not have the same personality type as Ray. And if he tried to fake it, it would seem that way. So you don't want to be a preacher and a screamer. Roquan Smith is more in that same mold where he can give a defensive speech in a way. And I'm not going to say they're at the same level, but I'm going to say he's more of that same mold. Lamar, it would seem fake. Where Lamar needs to lead this team is in practice and at the line of scrimmage. And he said those, and in the huddle, those 3 places are the place where he needs to lead this team. That will always be a little bit hidden to us, maybe less to Nick and me, because we see actually a fair amount of the practices during the summer. But it's less clear on the field that he's leading the team on a in the huddle, very hidden. Before the snap, that's also somewhat hidden. You have to really look for those keys to happen. That's the area where I'd like him to take a step forward.
It's something that I felt, and I know I keep saying we talked about in the first episode. We talked about how he took a step forward in terms of the effectiveness of what he was able to recognize and change at the line of scrimmage. And there, a lot of improvements at the line of scrimmage, but again, there's demanding excellence and there's being frustrated that your teammates aren't as good as you. And I think Lamar's thoughts are more the former, but I think sometimes it is perceived as more of the latter, and it can get perceived that way by not just us but his teammates as well.
Yeah, and that had that would have a potentially destructive component. I actually think that Lamar's view from his teammates is at the highest level. I don't think they view Lamar as anything but a man. I'm glad that guy's my quarterback. I think that's the way pretty much everyone's thought about him. Marshall Yanda was in a lot of ways the leader of this team in 2019, and the very famous moment where they went for it on 4th and 2 against Seattle, key moment in the season, and big road game against a very good team. They went for it on 4th and 2, 8-yard run, but on the sideline for the touchdown, but on the sideline right before the play, Harbaugh asked Jackson, "Do you want to go for it, Lamar?" And Jackson asked Yanda, "Hey, you want to go for it?" I've never seen that happen before. And you don't want that relationship, but Yanda actually played it back in exactly the way you should. Yeah, man, let's go. You kind of thing, as in, and then after the game, and the credit should all go to Lamar in that situation. But that leadership, the who's the guy in the room who you have to get their okay on? Sometimes in your household, it's your mom. Your mom has to say yes to something. Think about that relationship. He needs to be the mom of the huddle, the sideline, and all things when it comes to getting the proper approvals for something to occur.
Yeah, and again, the relationship with the new coach will play heavily into that. And again, very curious to see what that's going to be. Very curious to see the offensive coordinator going to be and how that entire staff develops, and to what extent is Lamar, how does he gel? I mean, I know that they care about how he gels in a personality sense with the hire. It does matter. I don't think it's any secret that he and Harbaugh weren't best of friends. They're very different people, very very different people.
Mhm.
And so it's not that they had some kind of adversarial relationship, but and even Todd Monken admitted this as well, that they didn't have as good of a relationship as they could have. So I think, again, that all factors into it. I think the idea about the Ravens doing this reset in general this offseason, Lamar's maybe the biggest factor in that. We talked about the contract last time as well, because that moving forward, he is still the guy, right? You've said bookend a number of times, right? The beginning of the season and the end of the season, he really did look like the Lamar of old and the player that we expect. And so if that is the guy we're getting who is on either end of the season moving forward, which is who I expect to see next year, they should be right back in it next year. And so they're going to have to find a way to coalesce new staff, the new staff, locker room, personnel changes. They're going to have to find a way to coalesce quite quickly.
It'll be a lot to put together, but they'll have, hopefully the offseason to do it, and in camp. Last thing I'm going to say about 2025 and why, another non-concession to age component is that 4 weeks into the season, Lamar had 130 quarterback rating and we were talking about the possibility of him breaking the all-time record. In fact, he took over at that point the number 1 career spot from Aaron Rodgers, and he's held on to it since. Although they're exactly even to 1 decimal place. He's slightly ahead after that. But I just don't think there's an indication that there's concession to age that is significant. I think he'll come back, he'll be healthy, and he'll be most of the quarterback, at least, that he was in 23 and 24 again.
We've talked about as well, the reliance on his legs. He is still that level as a passer. I think there's also a sense to which the offense develops And, he does use his legs less as that age does start to affect him. Again, it's not, I don't think it's here the way that people think it's here. But what he, to me, has proven in the last 3 years is that he not can outrun his legs, but he will be able to continue being a top quarterback in this league, even when he is not the fastest, most dangerous dual threat quarterback at the level that he has been for the last several years.
All right, let's look at 2026 and things we want to see for that. Maybe we kind of snake draft our way through this, Nik, if we can here. But I want to see him continue the offensive programs to improve his own mechanics. It's been a hallmark of Lamar Jackson throughout his career as he comes to camp with something new about his game. And that's something I really want to see him continue.
Yeah, so I'm just looking up I forget the name of his QB coach here, but that is something that he's done a really good job.
Harris, maybe? Harris?
Yeah, I can't remember who it was.
Let's say it's Josh Harris. It might have even been a guy who played briefly with the Ravens or was drafted by the Ravens at some point in the past.
Yeah, and I feel like he has been present at the Castle before, not often, not consistently, but I believe he has. I could be wrong about that. And in that same vein, right, is working with his own receivers, because I think as his mechanics, his release is unbelievable. There are things that I'm kind of still amazed the way that he's able to find things to improve every year. But to me, the part that was missing this past year was more of his chemistry with his receivers. We talked about this, Bateman was just not there. There were still a number of times, and this has been an issue with Bateman in the past, where he did his job and he got open and he didn't get the ball, and wondering, why did that happen? Why was Lamar not seeing him? Are there situations, where did that deep ball go, for example, between the two of them? That deep ball was phenomenal last year. And that was one of the big things that I noticed this year between Lamar and Bateman. So, and again, this factors into I know we're talking about it a lot, but it factors into the overall conversation about Lamar Jackson within this team. Will he be there at OTAs? Right? That is a huge thing every year. They're going to be installing at least some version of a new offense, right? I forget how often he came in 2023. Obviously, they did install the offense and do just fine that season, but it is the kind of thing that, they have started slow in the past. It's always good to get in more practice, especially when you're installing a new scheme. And so, I'm not super confident that he's going to show up any more than he has in the past, but I think if he does, would be a sign that he is starting to kind of embrace that role.
I agree with that. I mean, Roquan Smith is a guy who's there every single practice, and we have other people who've on these incredible practice streaks. We heard about Tavius Robinson having never missed a practice at any level, kind of thing. And that's, I love that kind of a personal thing. I mean, I've got some things in my own life, going to Orioles games for a long period of time, for about 20 years. I went to all the games under some condition, meaning I had to be in the state for the game, and I had to go there for at least an inning and whatnot. But I love those kind of streaks in players. I want to see them committed to just continuing something for the sake of continuing it. And that would be great. I want to see Bateman and Lamar working together during the offseason on their own down in South Florida. And this is a point. Lamar is perfectly within his own rights to say, let's do this. We're going to do this down here. I've got a field lined up. You guys come here. Me and Flowers are already here, and the rest of you guys can come down and be here. But get yourself a plane ticket, and you can stay at my place. Whatever the deal might be, work out for a couple of days like that. That's all you need. Just a little extra time. You hear all the stories. Unitas and Barry told him for years, even after Unitas died, of the relationship they had playing pitch and catch as it would get dark outside. And it just wonderful thing, good rapport with the receivers, in addition to just being good practice and good understanding about how they move and where they're going to be.
That's how you get the most out of the extended plays. That's, it's not just Lamar running around and able to extend the play. It's being able to actually everyone be on the same page about where to be downfield. They run this drill in training camp as well, where they'll run a scramble drill against certain coverages. So they're looking, okay, after certain amounts of time, where are the holes in these different coverage schemes? And how can we work on those? That's something I've always really watched. I've always felt like has been effective in helping them get on the same page about their chemistry. I don't know if there were more times this year than in the past where Lamar indicated after the play kind of they weren't on the same page about something, like that Hopkins play in, I believe, against the Steelers, where he wanted Hopkins to run
Yeah.
upfield instead of standing right at the marker. I don't know if there were more of those this season, or maybe they were just more noticeable because the Ravens didn't run as many plays, right? So that 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 ability to kind of communicate on the field in the middle of extended plays is one thing that I felt was really, he was able to do with, Likely and Bateman that just wasn't as present this year.
All right, I'll be able to go with the next one. I want to see them play with the lead effectively. Now, it's been pointed out regularly that Harbaugh has lost all these leads when he's had a 10-point advantage in the fourth quarter, and nobody else can seem to come up with one specific definition of it that is going to be used all the time, which is one of the frustrating things about this. But the Ravens have outscored their opponents by more than any other team, except maybe Buffalo now, since the beginning of Lamar's career. It's very close with Buffalo. That's naturally going to lead to more leads. And Lamar has been the quarterback who has rolled up those leads and, always.
Let me tell you about the online cannabis company that's changing the game, Mood.com. They created an entirely line of functional gummies, 100% federally legal THC blends, discreetly delivered right to your doorstep. And here's the best part. You can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com with the promo code RAVENS. Now, I've tried a bunch of their gummies myself. Each one's totally unique. The Sleepy Time gummies knock me out right away. They help me unwind fast, leave me refreshed the next morning. The Epic Euphoria gummies, they're perfect for when your day just isn't going the way you want it to go. What makes Mood special is how they pair the THC with natural herbs and adaptogens. You won't find blends like this at any local shop. They've got gummies designed for focus, relaxation, clarity, even energy, all made from cannabis grown on small, family-owned American farms. No pesticides, no shortcuts, just high-quality weed you can trust. Plus, Mood backs everything with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. So head on over to Mood.com, check out their amazing selection, and don't forget to use the promo code RAVENS at checkout to save 20% off your first order.
Hi, folks. The Super Bowl is here, and MyBookie is where you can turn your bets into bankroll. Are you scheduled to go to the Super Bowl party and you don't want to be there? Yeah, I've been to that party too. Managing your portfolio of wagers through the evening can be your ticket through Super Sunday without getting caught up in your brother-in-law's political rhetoric. Whatever your take on the game, MyBookie has both side and prop bets to make your Super Sunday a lot of fun. That's why I use MyBookie. You've probably heard them talked about on Jimmy Kimmel Live for their deep board of prop bets. These bets become some long-lasting memories, including watching Refrigerator Perry score in Super Bowl 20 at 100-1 odds. If there's ever a time to get in, it's right now. One account, one wallet, bet the spread, live bet the second half, hit the casino during commercials. It all lives in one place. Go to mybookie.ag now, use promo code RAVENS, and get your first bet covered up to $500. If it doesn't hit, use your bet back bonus token and run it back. Don't just watch the big game, make it pay on MyBookie. Sometimes it can feel like everyone else has it together in their love lives. Whether married, dating, or single, the truth is most of us are still figuring out and finding our way. February is a tough month, whether you're single or married. You may feel pressure with all the talk of flowers, candy, stuffed animals, relationships, and dating. Therapy can help you identify what's dragging on your relationships and find ways to brighten them again. Whether it's for individuals or couples, it's an opportunity to identify what's getting in the way and help remove obstacles to happiness. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp has quality therapists who work according to a strict code of conduct and are fully licensed in the United States. BetterHelp does the initial therapist matching work for you so you can focus on your therapy goals. A short questionnaire helps identify your needs and preferences, and their 12-plus years of experience and industry-leading match fulfillment rate means they typically get it right on the first try. If you aren't happy with your match, switch to a different therapist at any time. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 6 million people globally, and it works. With an average rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars for a live session based on over 1.7 million client reviews. Sign up and get 10% off at BetterHelp.com. That's BetterHelp.com. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
This episode is sponsored by Kalshi, the largest prediction market in the United States. Kalshi lets you trade on real-world events, peer-to-peer, instead of playing against a sports book. Kalshi is available across the country, including California and Texas, and it's a really fun way to put your predictions to the test. So here's how it works. You buy a yes contract if you think something will happen, or a no contract if you think it won't. So if you've got an opinion this weekend, like will the Seahawks win the big game this year, you can choose yes or no and trade on it. And you're trading with other users similar to buying and selling stocks. You can jump in and out of your position at any time to lock in a profit or cut your losses. Kalshi also offers combo trades where you can connect multiple predictions across different events to increase your potential payout. In short, Kalshi is where you put your money to where your prediction is. So download the Kalshi app and use the promo code SB60. When you deposit $10 and make a trade, you get your $10 back. That's promo code SB60 on Kalshi.
Has a great record in games he leads at halftime. He also needs to be one of the guys who plays effectively with the lead, and I'd like to see that improve. And a lot of that will be just a keep up with the sticks offense that I hope we see return in 26.
Yeah, I know there's the argument that, the best way to keep a lead is to add to it. But adding to it and, for example, holding on to the ball for longer aren't mutually exclusive things. Another thing we talked about in the first episode, the lack of plays, the need to have more sustained drives. And that is especially an issue when they have the lead, because they're just giving the ball back and giving the other team more and more frequent chances to get back into the game. And this is a part of the hunting for explosives thing that is an issue of the offense. And so, being able to more effectively sustain drives while you're ahead is the thing that they used to be so good at. They used to be so good at running these 8-minute drives in the second half, and the other team would get the ball twice, making it literally impossible for them to overcome the 17-point halftime deficit. So, that is a big element. I also think that does kind of, again, play into the ball distribution part of it, where, so many targets are funneled to Zay Flowers down the field. So many screens and shorter targets are funneled to him, these designer plays. And so I think, there is some extent to which the distribution of his passing just wasn't as effective. And I think when that happens, that can also just lead to fewer drives because you're not spreading around the ball as much. And it's easier for other teams to key in on certain guys.
With you
or
entirely.
If they feel like you're not throwing to them, we'll ignore them a little bit and put more cover somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm with you entirely on that. And, Monken's philosophy coming here was make them defend every blade of grass. If they're having to cover all your receivers and consider all of them, then you're a balanced offense. Then I think that's what the Ravens really want to get back to. And they've done a wonderful job in 23 and 24 of spreading the ball out very effectively. The tight ends in particular had done a lot more in 23 and 24 with less targets. So what really was a less was more situation. And the end of the Roman era, they were so over targeted, largely because they were on the field in unprecedented numbers. But they were so over targeted, it actually had reduced effectiveness. Too many on the margin poor targets. 23 and 24 under Monken, that was completely fixed. And Lamar and the tight ends were wonderful. Now, unfortunately, this year again, not in the same spot at all. Okay, well, I'll go on with my next one here. I think he could work through progressions, more quickly, but I think maybe more importantly, that is a different order of progression reading that might be less predictable by play. And I think most quarterbacks have this, where they have first read, second read. They like to read either from right to left or left to right, either way. Or they may read always from tight end play action to something else, to a third option, maybe 1, 2, 3 reads. And then, of course, there's a lot of one-read quarterbacks still in the NFL. They don't last long, but there are a lot of one-read quarterbacks. I would like Lamar to work through progressions in a less predictable order, I guess I would say.
I'm curious what does that mean to you functionally?
Right. So, okay, for starters, if you have Zay Flowers crossing is your primary weapon, okay, you still can go to him as read 2 or read 3 because those are longer developing routes. Okay. So you can look first to running back in the flat, try and draw defenders off that way. By the way, all this is how your eyes play against the safeties and what that was. Then you look at your wide receiver down the left sideline, then it's Zay in the middle of the field. Or you can look, your first read is some sort of slant pattern, and then you move to Zay in the middle of the field as you're setting up, and you may even pat the ball as Lamar probably wouldn't do that, but you might be waiting on him to break open, which was very effective at it. It's just it doesn't mean that there's not more effectiveness to be derived by having those reads in a different order.
And I think that kind of meshes with my point about sometimes taking what the defense gives you a little bit faster and being more willing instead of, waiting for Flowers to come open on the 18-yard crosser, taking the 4-yard drag that turns into a catch and run for 7 or 8. I think that's why I was kind of curious to explain what you meant by that, because I think that aligns with that idea. And it also aligns with the idea of sustaining drives. I think it's interesting, Ken, that a lot of the things that we're talking about are really all very, very, very much connected, all the way from like Lamar's leadership down to they need to sustain drives more, right? So it's obviously he's the quarterback. All quarterbacks are that important, but few quarterbacks are this important to their team, the way that Lamar Jackson does. Similarly to the progressions, right, is throwing on time. And anticipatory throwing. Again, Lamar loves to hold on to the ball because he can make all these great plays. I think his anticipatory throwing to Flowers is much better. Again, that's the chemistry element of it. But this is another Bateman area, right? This is another way that one of the strengths of Bateman is getting open as when he's manned up, is just getting open. But to really effectively capitalize on that, you have to be able to throw with anticipation.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I'll give you a second receiver. I think Bateman, being the best route runner on the team, is the guy who probably loses the most from Lamar not being a very frequent on schedule thrower. They don't do any sideline stuff with a comeback on the sideline like we saw from Flacco to Mason as the bread and butter play. That's very important for another receiver I'm going to mention, is Tez Walker. Walker is a guy who's worked hard, I think, this last year to develop a little bit of ability to come back for the football, missing from his college game entirely. He was a 7, 8, 9 guy pretty much all in college, and he still has that. He still has the ability to get behind the defense and really threaten a guy. We saw that a fair amount this last year in terms of really big plays made to him. But they've got to capitalize, and to do that, they've got to actually fear the possibility of him coming back for the football to maximize what he can do on 7, 8, 9. And they're not going to fear it unless Lamar will occasionally throw it there, coming back for the football. I did really love, by the way, the fact that they went to Tez Walker on the outside in the last field goal attempt drive against Pittsburgh. It was a little 8-yard play on first down. Maybe didn't seem like a lot to other people, but they'd gone to him deep earlier in the game, and he beat Ramsey, and they went this time and looked really. I mean, I was just really happy to see it.
One more thing on what you just said before you get to your next point on Bateman. I've always held the belief that he would just do way better statistically outside of Baltimore. His contract is great, and I think I would like to think that last year was it's a down year for everyone, and that he can bounce back from that and go back to the production of 2023. But I still firmly believe that if go put him in New England with Drake May and make him a much more featured part of that offense. Have always just wondered what that would turn out to be like.
You're talking Bateman, you put him Bateman or Walker, or you're talking
Bateman.
Lamar? Okay, yeah.
Bateman. Sorry, I've always been curious about Bateman going to just a more pass-heavy offense that just features him and his ability to get open a little bit more. And I forgot my second point, so we'll go back to you to keep moving.
Okay, so just talking about game management skills is what I want to go through. I think the pace of play, getting to the line of scrimmage quickly, is something the Ravens improved. I'd like them to continue to do very well, and I hope the next coaching regime will maintain that part of the Ravens' DNA. They'll see that they did it well last year on the tape they watch, and they'll try and make that a big part of their offensive identity in 26.
I think that's kind of it's interesting. I think that it seems like pace runs contrary to the idea of sustaining longer drives. There is one, but I don't think that's necessarily true, because you can always get up to the line of scrimmage and then wait and not snap the ball. can be a little bit harder on the offensive line sometimes when you do that. But I also think that element of, because they focus so much on personnel mismatching, they don't take advantage of the fact that they can hurry up and prevent substitutions.
Well, first of all, I agree with you in terms of that you can take your time at the line of scrimmage. And the Patriots, great teams, always did that. They got to the line of scrimmage quickly, let Brady look around, make his checks, call the audible, basically call the play out of the formation that was called in the huddle at the line of scrimmage. And Lamar Jackson may or may not be completely ready to do all those things, or that may be not be the best use of him, but it's still getting to the line of scrimmage is fine. The other component of that is it's not time of possession, which is important. So you can go ahead and run quickly if you want. It's play count that's effective. And the reason is this: there's always about the same amount of time between plays in the NFL. So if you're talking about getting your defense a breather off the field, really play count is the much bigger input into that. You often will get injuries, which will cause a commercial break. That it will also give your defense further rest, and more plays, more chance for that to occur. Hopefully they're the other team and not your own team, but they are a part of what happens in a game of football. The time of possession, people, it always kind of tightens me up a little bit when I hear that, because I don't really think it's the important thing. I think it's play count. It's like location in real estate.
I think the time factor of it to me comes more in-game time management.
Oh, ending the game, yeah.
Right. And again, an area in which I'm curious to what extent Lamar Jackson can step up in terms of, making those decisions and working with the offensive coordinator, if it's the head coach calling the plays, working with them on, or I guess with the head coach in any sense, in any event, how to best manage, these situations. Because, I've talked about, there are just a lot of times where Harbaugh did not squeeze everything he could have optimally in terms of the time. Right. So
you remember that in the Cincinnati win in Baltimore, the loss to Cincinnati, Joe Burrow late in that game, the stadium was largely empty because the Ravens were getting killed. And Joe Burrow's at the line of scrimmage saying, got a lot of time left, 15, 14, 13. I'm like, that is embarrassing as hell that he could call that against the Ravens, first of all, in our house, and do it. I get if it happened in Cincinnati, well, it'd have been good football. For that to happen in Baltimore, it's just awful.
Yeah, and there were a number of times we talked about it on a few specific occasions where they did not make the optimal game management move. And I don't mean necessarily Zay Flowers going down on the one. That is, I think, a more complicated discussion. Touchdowns count. Players get paid off of that. Those things factor in. But in terms of what the coaching decisions are, they were suboptimal a number of times. And I'm curious to hear what Lamar's views on some of these game management things are, and to what extent he's going to get more involved in
that. Reading the defense better at the line of scrimmage, audibles, what kind of improvement are you looking for there?
Specifically, I think part of it is him being able to, like what we talked about in the first section, to me, it's all about figuring out the right ways to pull the right levers against the blitz. And not just against the blitz, but against pressure looks. Because teams have figured out pretty much that you can't just outright blitz Lamar Jackson. You have to throw elements of deception there, simulated pressure. We talked about the 3-man mush rush and the spy. And I think it is both kind of reading those things at the line of scrimmage and having a better idea of where the pressure is coming from, but also having answers that will work, that will solve multiple problems, if that makes sense. Like right when the ball is snapped, you could have a number of different problems in terms of pressure that's coming at you. And I think there were many times where he found a solution for what he was expecting, and that was what happened, and he was able to capitalize. I think there were other times where he made a check at the line of scrimmage. The pressure did not come in the way that he expected, and the play that he had checked into didn't give him any outlet, any way to get out of it. So I think coming up with, and again, I know we talk about some of this stuff. This is not easy to do, right? But figuring out blitz counters that work more, that are a little bit more adaptable to different kinds of pressure.
Yeah, and some of that will be having a improved set of personnel along the offensive line, the interior offensive line specifically to pass block. I think their tackle situation is set. They've got their 3 guys going forward. I think it's really the interior that they're going to have to be working on in this draft. By the way, that's a really nice thing, folks, to not be worried about having to draft an offensive tackle with all of the draft capital that would require is a really nice parole that the Ravens are on currently from needing that. But the need to draft potentially 3 offensive linemen, or the need to find 3 offensive linemen for the 26 team, that's a very tall order they're going to have to look at. And yeah,
it makes it even more crucial to be able to do this stuff, because we said this in the first pod, they might have to get worse to get better a little bit, especially if they're replacing Linderbaum at center and they're having to put someone else in there. And again, it is going to be the pre-snap preparedness for pressure that is going to help them kind of overcome some of these potential bumps of having new offensive linemen, and just whether they're younger and not as good at blocking. We've talked about the processing, all of those things. The more that Lamar can do to kind of mitigate that pre-snap, the better, right? And I think that, again, knowing there's a new offensive coordinator and a new offensive line coming in makes it an especially important thing.
Turnovers were, I think, he had a great turnover year in 2024, but he had a turnover year in 2025 that was not utterly terrible, and a lot of it was on the receivers again, in terms of reducing that. And unfortunately, the receivers had fumbles after the catch, and Henry had some fumbles. A lot of the turnover problems the Ravens had weren't really Lamar based, both in terms of the offense and the defense. The team needs to improve in both areas in terms of reducing and increasing turnovers and takeaways, respectively.
Yeah, if you consider the amount of times that he dropped back to pass or had the ball and was scrambling, even relative to past seasons, you can actually argue he maybe even did a little bit better this year, with the fumbles specifically. Interceptions, I just have never been that worried about Lamar when it comes to his interceptions. He hates interceptions. He loathes them. You can tell if he throws one that is on him, he is beating himself up. So many of these are just these ridiculous interceptions, man. Like I can't imagine how frustrated he must be to go back and watch. You know, I did this before. I forgot to count, but if you go back and watch all of his interceptions, like a quarter of them are on him. It's not even like half of them are on him. It is such a huge discrepancy. And so
the Keaton Mitchell tip, the Zay Flowers, right through his hands on the right sideline for the interception.
The bats at the line of scrimmage and those falling into the opponent's hands, and so I guess the interception side of it I don't worry about. The fumble side of it has gone, I think, up and down in his career, where there have been times where I felt more and less comfortable. I felt like this past season, proportional to the number of times he was getting hit dropping back, because that is when he fumbles, not when he is scrambling and trying to get yards. Typically, it is when it's not when he's running forward with the ball past the line of scrimmage when he fumbles. It is typically when he is behind the line of scrimmage, either in the pocket or scrambling. Based on the amount of times he was in those situations where he was getting hit, I think the rate at which he fumbled was pretty reasonable and not something I'm particularly worried about. But I do think that those turnovers had a tendency to stunt the comebacks that the Ravens had. And again, they weren't all necessarily on a lot. Most of them were not on him. But that would be a problem when the Ravens were trying to win at the end of the game, is they just have a turnover and they would, the Bills game, the Lions game, it happened, a number of times, especially early in the season. But those weren't real. Again, it's hard to put those instances on him. And then if you look at the times when they did have to come back, he was coming back in a fury every single time.
Let's talk about the other players who played quarterback for the Ravens and what maybe their role is going to be in 26. Cooper Rush, any reason why he'll be back with the Ravens?
I can't imagine. It. That contract was pretty clearly done as a 1 year with a 1 year option. I don't see a reason for him to be the quarterback. I guess part of me understood the signing when it happened originally. I understood the thought and the intent behind it, but I've always felt, I know we'll talk about it more in a second, but I just never understood why they didn't just say, hey, can you come back to Tyler Huntley? Hey, can you come back and be the backup? We'll give you like a Cooper Rush-esque, backup contract. You could argue Huntley's, market value might be probably a little bit lower than what Rush got. But that was kind of the thing that baffled me was Huntley's not getting starting opportunities anywhere else. It's just not going to happen. He's not going to be better than a QB2 anywhere else. There are a lot of places in which he'd be a QB3 or not, be on the roster at all. And so that was the one thing that just did not compute to me on both ends of why they didn't get together and figure that out sooner.
And he was like the fifth man for the Browns,
Right.
in camp. So it was a strange situation, that's for sure. Very efficient, but limited in his wins versus the Bears and the Packers. I don't have anything negative to say about Tyler Huntley other than he didn't play well in previous years for the Ravens. There's nothing about his 2025 play that I point to and say that wasn't good backup quarterback play. In fact, those two games he had were two of the 5 or 6 greatest ever by a Ravens backup quarterback. And I actually think it'll hurt the Ravens' chance to retain him because I think he might have better dollar offers from somewhere else. Just all the things. It's been a big year for Tyler Huntley, but the commercials that he's done have been fantastic. I mean, that's just some of the greatest stuff you'll ever see. Getting a chance to do that and having that campaign come through at exactly the right time for him, utterly great.
Yeah, I was doubling over in laughter during that Packers game. There was just a sense of comedy to the way that game was playing out, whether it was the constant handoffs to Derrick Henry or Tyler Huntley calling 2 or 3 QB draws in a row. It seemed like, I don't know if he was necessarily calling his own number or to what extent communication was, but some of those hurry up situations, it seemed like he did. And, I just thought it was just a very, very funny game in some ways to watch. I like to call Huntley a gamer because he is never a quarterback you want to think about as your real starter. But I just, you throw him out to go try and win a game, he is going to do everything he possibly can to do it. And not in the sense of pushing, but in the sense of operating the offense and making the plays when he needs to. I felt like the story of the Bears game, especially the Packers game, was I'm handing the ball off to Derrick Henry, but when a pass needs to be made, I'm going to make it, and he does. I don't think it's worth getting into the drawbacks of his throwing mechanics and stuff, for example, because he does exactly what you said. He does what you ask a backup quarterback to do. So I really think they should just get together, and he got that sponsorship. They really should just get together and figure out what is a reasonable deal, because he gets a contract from another team. Who knows how much it's going to be guaranteed, but he could quickly find himself on the outs with that team if he's just not the right mesh with their offense the way that he is with the Ravens. And that's both in the scheme sense, but also in the chemistry sense.
Yeah, it definitely true. He's young enough that he could still have maybe 4 or 5 years as a Ravens backup quarterback. They wouldn't sign him to one contract for that period of time, but it could be a succession of 2-year deals, say. Where they, I'm hoping the right range would be 2 years for maybe 6 to 8 million, not what Cooper Rush was given over the 2 years, maybe with some incentives. But I could even see that it would be less. And they could still have a pretty good chance to get him. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything that he brings to the offense that is so special. It's more his understanding of how the Ravens want to run their offense that really was special in 2025.
And that's why I say that get together to work something out, because there's got to be a sense to which he has to be realistic with himself and his real chances of getting another starting job. I forget exactly how old he is, but especially at this stage of his career, even a chance to get a computer starting job. Like, he's not Jacoby Brissett, and Jacoby Brissett stopped getting these chances once he got up to this age. And I've always been a big Jacoby Brissett guy, but that's a different point. I also think there's some being realistic that he has to do, having already tried this and gone to 2 other teams and really just not been able to hang on. Those teams wanted him there. Obviously, they were excited to have him initially, but once they got him in the building and he was in their offense, it was clear that he just – in a weird way, I don't think he's a good backup quarterback for a lot of teams. He is a good backup quarterback for the Ravens, and I think that they need to recognize that this is ideal for both sides. It's ideal for Tyler Huntley to be in Baltimore. It's ideal for the Ravens to have him. And it is kind of just a matter of coming up with a decent contract number. And maybe that has been the hesitancy with the Ravens to properly, re-sign him, pursue him in the offseason before. But I think this season made it very clear, one, he's the right guy. Two, really, how much other interest is I'm not sure how much interest there's going to be. I'm not sure how much interest there's going to be in, in this upcoming offseason in him. Because when you think about, that game against the Packers, the real highlight backup quarterback was Malik Willis. That's a backup quarterback who could become a starter. And so I think that contrast kind of shows up in that game, and you get a better sense of the fact that he's just really not going to go compete for a starting job somewhere else.
Well, so with Malik Willis, there's a real chance that he ends up in Pittsburgh this next year. They've been through the Justin Fields experience, so they may not be crazy about that idea, but I think there is really a chance. But he very well could be the projected starter for some sort of a team that has a problem at quarterback right now.
The Miami Dolphins.
It could be the Miami Dolphins, you think?
They just took the Packers, executive as their GM and defensive coordinator as their head coach. It's on the table, I'm sure.
All right. Well, I think we'll call it there. Nik, I really appreciate you coming on and spending almost 2 hours talking about this. A lot of fun, always is talking to you, but tell folks where they can find your work.
Can be found at baltimorebeatdown.com. We're running a lot of coaching coverage right now. We'll be continuing to cover the search for new staff, and then I'm really hoping to have it be somewhat of a hub for draft content. So, be tuned over there. And I'm on Twitter at Nik, Nik, Noseball.
All right. Other folks out there, thanks so much for listening. As always, pass this show along to one other person. Like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And we'll talk to you soon on Film Study.